Yes, it is that time again, once again, to talk about Crimson Desert. And we got some really exciting news today because, yes, people are playing the game. We got another Korean YouTuber who's reviewing the demo. Some really cool thoughts there. Plus, a big question, are there actually too many dungeons and fortresses? What do we think? So we're going to take a look at that. That's actually kind of a legit concern. I'll explain in a moment. Plus, a really cool mechanic from Shadow of the Colossus. And first major red flag that we have to talk about, but is it really a red flag? Is this over exaggerated? Plus, you know what? The dev team, or I should say the community manager, was asked, what can you actually do in this open world? And he gave an actual interesting response, one that a lot of people didn't anticipate. Some people were kind of like, hey, you still didn't answer the question, but I think he went into a very interesting direction with his answer that we absolutely have to talk about. Plus, you know what? Yes, once again, I'm doing a $70 game giveaway, which means that, yeah, you can actually get yourself none other than Crimson Desert if you win. If you want a chance to enter or actually win, the $70 game giveaway, see that link in the top pinned comment. Good luck to everyone who enters. But yeah, a lot of interesting things going on today, including some details about Crimson Desert's performance that I think a lot of you guys will be very, very happy. Some little details that you might not know about, and a big win for the dev team here because they actually said no to a very, very big company, which I think bodes very, very well for Pearl Abyss. Plus, we got to talk about the voice actors and actresses in this game. It's actually really, really impressive. And did you know the boss fights feel completely different in daylight and at night? Some really cool stuff going on there. But I got a question for you all, starting this all out. Who took off time from work for the release of this game? Let me know. It seems like many of you have actually called in and are planning an all-day marathon, kind of like a staycation, if you would, about all things Crimson Desert. And honestly, I can't blame you guys at all. This game looks too good to be true. That's what a lot of people are saying. I completely get that slogan there, but we have this right here. Yeah, another Korean YouTuber is reviewing the demo, and it says this. He is live right now, but like other YouTubers, he can't talk about it in detail because of the embargo, which I believe lifts tomorrow. So I'm going to have tons of details about this game. So smack that subscribe button. Stay updated. You're going to want to stay in the know about this one. Now, it says, still, unlike others, he shared a more in-depth impression. He said the target audience for this game is people who enjoy a sense of challenge and proactive play, which I think a lot of us are in that category. And he said, staking his own channel, that he has never seen a game with this kind of combat system until now. He has played almost all the console games out there and loves Skyrim and Fallout and so much that he has invested hundreds of hours into both games. He hates what they call click-only games, like the recent Korean-style MMO, so it might be that Crimson Desert just fits his taste better. But he left a review saying he had so much fun that he lost track of time, and that is what we want to hear. And also, it's great to hear that the combat is so unique. You know, again, like when I see the combat in this game and the actual gameplay, you can immediately identify, oh, hey, that's Crimson Desert. You're not getting it confused with a Souls-like. You're not getting it confused with like The Witcher 3. It definitely looks like its own thing, and I'm so excited to hop into it. Now, other impressions also said about the combat that it's also quite challenging. And we do have one difficulty setting with this game, you got to remember, but it works in a way where you can evolve your character by finding new weapons, better gear, that sort of thing around the open world, and then redo bosses or areas that you cannot, undertake on the first go around, which I really am excited for at the end of the day. But yeah, again, remember those impressions are still rolling in here. We're going to have more tomorrow for sure. But you know what? It begs the question, are there going to be too many dungeons and fortresses? What do we think? We already know that the map is absolutely huge. They did give us kind of like this screenshot of the map, a piece of the map. And you can see that there are fortresses on top of fortresses. But again, we don't know the distance between these fortresses. But let's get into what was said here, because it is a viable concern if it just becomes redundant throughout the open world. And it feels like you're just checklisting off stuff. So it says this. Well, since it's a discussion forum, I want to share a concern that I had while reviewing the presentation videos. Could this game end up being a new Far Cry? I played almost most of the Far Cry franchise titles and always enjoyed them a lot. However, over time, the formula has become saturated and extremely repetitive. I wonder if we risk having a gym on our hands that by repeating the same dungeon and activity approach model so much ends up being tiresome. I will say about Far Cry, one of my personal favorite Far Cry games was Far Cry 5. Let me know what yours was. And it did kind of have still like somewhat of a checklist system, but it also had a lot of story involved with the open world, which I loved. Now it says, observe in the image the number of dungeons in a relatively short, if I could even speak, section of the map. I saw a post here on the subreddit showing the magnitude of the game world. Will we have this same density of combat spread throughout the map? If so, I hope they've thought of ways to make this repetition truly fun and varied. Yeah, and when I look at this map, one thing that I personally love is when they do have these POIs, these point of interest, and it's not just kind of like you're just randomly stumbling into things. I personally, again, really like where there are story-driven reasons. If they have really cool characters and side missions and stories that are involved with these areas, I think that does a lot to a game's world. For example, like if you're in a main town and they tell you, hey, something's going on at this fort, or there's a story reason that brings you out there, that can add a lot of meaning and value and give you a push and a reason to go out there and explore to that fort. And maybe there's like some sort of mystery. I also like when they involve like kind of like short horror stories, ghosts and that sort of thing involved with even like these type of point of interest. So there are ways that they can actually pull off having this many fortresses stacked up on top of each other if there's actually interesting backstory to them. Now, an interesting take here is this one right here. The main thing Ubisoft missed is that doing the content itself was never really rewarding other than marking off a checklist. At least with this game, each dungeon can be a new recipe or the piece of gear you need to even the odds against a challenging boss or area, or even a new move you can memorize. This seems to be more like Zelda, Elden Ring in terms of dungeons and why we do them, which is personally why I love it. So yeah, I completely agree with that one. They all have already confirmed the type of game that this is. It's not going to be like The Witcher 3 or anything like that. It is definitely more in line with a Zelda type experience, which again, like, that open world is extremely rewarding. Now, there's a really cool mechanic that was actually highlighted right here. Check it out. I love that they added the sword glint mechanic from Shadow of the Colossus. And you can see, it takes you to point of interest, as you can see right here. And also, yeah, I want to show you guys the desert region. It just looks absolutely beautiful. But yeah, right here, you activate it and you can see shiny points of interest. This also kind of reminds me of many other open world games out there. It's nothing exactly special, but the way it's done is definitely unique. So check it out. Shadow of the Colossus was my favorite game for 10 years. Explored it thoroughly despite it being mostly empty. That Pearl Abyss added the sword glint mechanic to find colossi for points of interest has only interest my hype. Makes me think they're also fans. I love it when an open world game gives you mechanics aside from a mini map to navigate. I like turning off the HUD and map to literally get lost in the world. That's me. That is 100% me, and find my own way. So having a way to find things without a map is very welcoming news. And that reminds me of also, I've been playing Ghost of Yote as well, and they have you where you use the spyglass mechanic, where you just get up on top of like a mountain or a little plateau and take a look around. That's the sort of thing I really love. It's kind of like using your own eyeballs to find point of interest. So that's cool. And the draw distance is also absolutely fantastic. But you know what? We also have more concerns. So check it out. Let's see if this one is like an over-exaggeration or not. So it says first major red flag. So we have some details here. 80 kilometer to map size, much bigger than Red Dead Redemption 2 and Skyrim. 6 hours to cross by foot, 2 hours to travel by horse. Flying is the fastest option, which unlocks later in the game. Kind of wish we didn't even know that detail. But it says a massive map is never a good sign. There's objectively zero chance it won't be filled with large amounts of empty space. I get that people probably struggle to comprehend how large this is and will claim it's possible for the next coming off Christ to be filled to the brim, but it's not. It will have insane amounts of empty space. We have seen time and time again that advertising a ridiculously large map ends up being a bad thing. And I gotta say, the concern is valid. You definitely don't want too big of a map with nothing to do. But also, you don't want a map that's just where you're walking 1 minute and there's always some sort of fight, something bothering you. You do definitely, in my opinion, need some level of downtime to make skirmishes, massive boss battles more meaningful. That is super important. A lot of people reacted kind of like the same way that I feel. Old news, we know it's packed. Why? I think it's your opinion. I love big maps. I love Ancient Shadows, Kingdom Come Deliverance, especially Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, Red Dead Redemption 2. So a lot of people are like embracing the fact that this is going to be a very large open world game. Seamless. That's one thing that I am really, really loving, is how seamless this is going to be. It seems like you'll be able to enter towns without any major loading screens. But I also think this ties nicely into the next question, which the community manager was asked. What you can do in the open world. What exactly can you do? So I say we take a moment and actually take a listen. So check this out right here.
More for the informed fan. So what do you do in the open world? I think one of the really cool things is we call it the continent of Pywell. Each country has its own geography. It has its own geopolitics. It has its own approach to how they feel about technology.
So this is cool. You could clearly tell with this game that they didn't just make an open world. They deeply thought about how it could be somewhat realistic with politics in play, opinions about certain emerging technologies that some, civilizations might not want in their world and kind of have a clash against. So this sort of thing is something that I love, and it makes an open world feel believable. Again, it's kind of telling a story per region, which is actually really, really important. But let's continue on here.
And there are factions within them. Sometimes they're at war, sometimes they're at peace, and your faction is kind of butting heads with them at times. So there's different world states within these countries. That's at kind of like the macro level. There's 5 different countries. The one you start in the game at Hernand, which is kind of think medieval castle, just what you'd expect in a medieval fantasy open world. Payloon, which is a little bit more of a forested region. That's where you are your faction is the protectors of, and you got kicked out of it. So your initial goal is to kind of retake that. Demonis, which is kind of the geopolitical and military stage of this entire world. There's Delicia, which is the science hub. We released footage of mechs and flying robots.
And it's not only like story that's going to be tied to these regions, they're also going to be unveiling new gameplay mechanics connected to the story, connected to the region. Again, it's all going to be finely interconnected, which in my opinion, this sounds like they actually really do know what they're doing when they develop this open world. So this type of detail right here gets me super excited. But anyway, moving on, we have some details here about Crimson Desert's performance. So check it out. Crimson Desert seems to be so well optimized that it's available on MacBooks M1 and above. That tells you a lot. Plus, yeah, they're aiming for 60 frames per second on consoles. It seems like that is also kind of like including the base consoles in there as well. Because I know a lot of you guys have asked me previously, what about like the base PS5 versus the PS5 Pro? They've still been kind of quiet about those comparisons right now. Once we get those details, I think like Digital Foundry will do a superb breakdown of all of this. Then we have Pearl Abyss recommends an RTX 2080, not too shabby, Ryzen 5 5600 and 135 gigabytes for ideal performance on PC. So PS5 Pro enhancements once again confirmed, and we have some glorious screenshots right here. Now, some reactions asking, is this going to be Unreal Engine 5? No, remember, this is their very own engine, which I think they were able to really fine tune and optimize as well. Now, if this holds up at launch, that's going to be seriously impressive. I do think, yeah, we will see some patches. Crossing my fingers it performs as intended here. Also, yeah, they say this. I heard somewhere, though, that Quest content capped out at 50 hours. I hope that's not true. Dragon's Dogma 2 had that same issue, great world and game with zero content. Now, what I've heard from like the actual PR people is that hundreds and hundreds of hours of content with this game potentially, and, a very, very big story on top of it as well. Now, moving on here, check out this little detail. You can chop down any tree in Crimson Desert using an axe or magic attacks and use the wood for crafting. An insane detail to put in a game that looks as photorealistic and huge as this. Yeah, I did not expect the trees to actually come down like that. That is wild considering, in the gameplay, like right here, there are a ton of trees. And to consider that potentially you could knock down every single one of these trees, that's actually a huge accomplishment. Yeah, I am still wondering how this game is going to be running overall. We'll see. We will see. But you know what? We have a huge win here for Pearl Abyss, the dev team. So check it out. So yeah, Sony reportedly tried to lock Pearl Abyss into a timed exclusive deal for Crimson Desert, but the studio ended up saying no. Instead, they're going to be self-publishing to a wider audience for the foreseeable future. So yeah, kudos to the dev team for sticking to their guns and, making sure that this game right out of the gates is delivered to everyone, no matter what platform you're going to be on. You're going to be able to experience Crimson Desert and not feel like you're missing out. Plus, I think the timing would have been really, really weird to kind of team up with Sony, considering that they just closed down Blue Point, which is known for some really, really amazing work. So yeah, I feel like in a way, potentially Crimson Desert has kind of like dodged a bullet. Don't get me wrong. Sony has made some absolutely amazing exclusives. It's just like, damn, they've shut down some absolutely stellar studios. And it's just been kind of like gut-wrenching to witness. But anyway, we got to talk about, yes, the voice actors and actresses. Check this out. The character Damien in Crimson Desert is performed by Rebecca Hansen, who is best known as Eve in Stellar Blade. So Stellar Blade fans, rejoice that you guys will be excited to hear about that one. But we also have the whole cast right here. You can pause the screen if you want to for yourself. But someone highlights some really cool details. We have Alec Newman voices Cliff. He played Paul Atreides in the Sci-Fi Channel adaptation of the first 3 Dune books, done over 2 seasons, and was actually unironically excellent. He also voices Adam Smasher, the big corpo robot guy in Cyberpunk as well. So that's actually a really cool detail to learn right there heading into, the release of Crimson Desert. And get this, did you know the boss fights feel completely different in daylight and nighttime? So you'll be stumbling upon perhaps some of these boss fights naturally throughout your exploration. Here's an example of this dude facing off against him during the day, but you could see how the tone shifts at nighttime and how different it can actually feel. Here's this beautifully detailed golden dragon, and look at the lighting, how different and impactful it is at nighttime with the fire and everything all around. You could see during the day, this kind of it almost feels like a cathedral type environment right here. But at nighttime, again, is going to be lit up by fires and feel very, very atmospheric and different. But I got to ask you guys, are you going to be more prone to perhaps roam around the open world during the day or nighttime? I'm also really interested in learning if perhaps rewards and things like that shift and change based on the day and night cycle. That would actually be legit. But anyway, I think you guys know what time it is. Yes, I have your top comments right here. Remember to leave a comment down below. And again, I'm doing a big $70 game giveaway. So to get in on this, check out that link in the description, or it's the top comment, the pinned top comment down below. But let's see what you guys had to say here. So here's the first one. They have already addressed the multiple button combinations to do one thing, and they tweak stamina to only be used with skill attacks and removed it from light attacks. Hell yes, I love to hear it because, there was some complaints about the early build where just to pick up a flag or an object in the actual open world, you have to go through 8 different button combinations apparently, which sounds pretty wild. But to know that that is not going to be a thing, I'm kind of having a sigh of relief because if you're playing hundreds and hundreds of hours in a game, you don't want it to feel too, monotonous and, a pain in the butt just with the controls. And we have, I still want to see performance on the base PS5. Again, we're going to have to wait for Digital Foundry's take on that. So yeah, I cannot wait to see what they have to provide for that. Maybe, you know what? They might show stuff, maybe, just maybe, tomorrow. And we have great content, bud. By the way, you have a typo in your title. Thank you for letting me know. By the way, I got that fixed. Thank you for that one. And we have, I'm more excited for this than GTA 6. I didn't think it was possible. Hell yes. And I've seen those comparisons like this game's going to be so much better than GTA 6. It's going to be game of the year. My attitude is I'm just glad that they aren't releasing on top of each other, that we actually have space between two high quality games. I can't stand when two high quality games release on top of each other and you just don't have any time. So that's one thing that I think is a huge positive with Crimson Desert actually going gold and finally releasing here in March, is that yes, we'll get a good deal of chunk of time to actually enjoy it, So yeah, super hyped for that one. But anyway, yeah, there it is. The latest happenings around Crimson Desert. Thank you guys so much for all the comments. I wish I could read over all of them. But yeah, stay tuned here for more Crimson Desert stuff because I think they're going to be rolling out a ton of news here even today. And yeah, tomorrow is going to be very, very big for this game. But thanks guys so much for watching. Stay tuned here for more and I will see you all next time. Take care.